I'm not sure about this video. I'm just not, for two reasons. One, I don't know if anyone's going to click on it. You know, Drake is suing people and he's being sued for being a gambling groomer, and Screwface John and Justin Hunt are like using the term, and I'm all happy. And this would be a great moment for me to kind of go down into the Drakey Drake hole. But you know, I don't really like talking about anything sort of commentary related unless I have a specific angle, a framing device on it. So I'm not going to do that. I'm like three-quarters done with the Dave review, with a Racing Mount Pleasant review, but I'm not quite finished. I'm really busy. I have a not much time. So I'm not really sure if I should even do this video where I explain how I make my videos. You know, one part, how do I analyze texts? How do I analyze lyrics? How do I process this information? The second question is, how broad and arrogant do I get with my title? Do I just call it How to Analyze Lyrics? Do I call it How Do I Analyze Lyrics? You know, what's the difference between those? If I say how I analyze lyrics, then, you know, presumably a lot of people won't click on it because they'll say, who is this guy? You know, I've only got whatever, 170,000 subscribers. Thank you very much. Please subscribe and smash like bucket. But like, you know, a lot of people just kind of go, well, whoever this guy is, I don't care. So if I call it how to analyze lyrics, well, that might get a more general audience, or I might say how a professor analyzes lyrics, and that might get more of a general audience. But that's getting a lot more sort of arrogant because then it's it's sort of like, well, who am I? You know, I am a professor and I have studied literary analysis and all that stuff, you know, but you know, who am I? The most arrogant title I was thinking of was a discourse on my method, just because you know I've read Descartes' Discours de la méthode, you know, the famous book that includes I think, therefore I am. I don't think I'll call it that. So I sort of up in my head on that, and then I don't know. So why am I releasing this? Why are you looking at this? Well, because one, I am asked quite often, how do you do it, Sky? Because I don't like, okay, I'm going to be a little bit arrogant. I don't do what everyone else does. There are things that I do that other people don't do. And some people might think there are things they can't do, and maybe that's true, but I want to share this method with you, how I do it. But it wasn't even intentional. It was kind of unintentional. My friend Matt, friend of the channel, he's a teacher, a professor over at University of Rochester. Um, he should make YouTube videos. Dude knows a lot about music. Jesus Christ. There's like what I know about music and what he, you know, like a real professor of music. That's an amazing thing. But anyways, he invited me to his class that's largely about like poetry and about lyrics. It's a 100 level class, and we were kind of going back and forth. Like, should I take over? Should I do my own thing? Should I build on what you're doing? Should I fit in the syllabus? All these questions until eventually we landed on this idea of just sort of a general take on how to analyze lyrics using the methodology, using the terminology of literary analysis, you know, like real grad schools type stuff. So that's what I did. And then I just realized, well, what the hey? Why don't I share this with you? Maybe some people will like it. Maybe some people will love it. And even better, maybe some people will find it useful, you know, because one of the things I try and do on my channels is I try to democratize the information that I hold. And I know that sounds super arrogant, but just hear me out, okay? I was put in a position through circumstances that I did not earn. I was able to get a great education due to many generations of social reproduction that put me in a position to get a really great education, which I did. And so I do think if I can share that with people right here for free on YouTube, I mean, hopefully you're a YouTube Premium member. Maybe you had to sit through some commercials. If you do, don't buy anything on the commercials. They're all lying to you. Yeah. So, anyways, that's the basic idea. So let's get to this. Right? Let's get to this. And what I'll do here is just on a more general level. Yes, that's right. Thank you for auditing the Always Positive New Music Review Show, hosted by a French professor who is sharing his slides. Whenever I have an album, I always search for a framing device, like some hook, some angle that I have that I can add to a discussion. This is why I don't do grades, because grades are the angle. When you decide to make a determination, up, thumbs down, 5 out of 5, 10 out of 10, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, S tier, all that. the angle, the point of the whole video, the point of the whole essay, the point of everything leads to that one singular point. What is the grade? What is the number? And I don't feel comfortable doing that with art. I just don't feel comfortable doing it. I don't mind other people doing it. I like it when other people do it, but I want to have something to say. So, what I'm going to be talking about today is the way that I find something to say about all the 1,000 albums that I've reviewed. You go back, every single album I've reviewed, I have some kind of angle, some kind of approach, and it all comes from these techniques. Yeah, that's right. I used an image of Inspector Clouseau because what do 20-year-old college kids love more than Blake Edwards' fascinating movies starring Peter Sellers as a bumbling detective? Everybody knows this. Anyways, I went with inspecting a text. Okay. But I modernized it a bit. I included the guy over there who's called the detective, but he's actually just a really well dressed French guy. And this is my system. You check for text, you check for paratext, you check for intertext, you check for metatext, and you check for text again. Then I forgot. I apologize to Matt. If you're watching, I apologize. Probably watching, making sure I don't say anything bad about your class. It's a great class, great students. Um, but like I I thought that that was implied, the context, but I realized I need to make it more explicit. So as you're looking at all these things, right? I'm going to be coming up with this whole list and this whole system. I need to say something right off the bat, which is this is not this the effort for me was finding out to reverse engineer what my method is. Because, I've been studying how to analyze art, how to analyze literature, how to analyze music for the better part of, what, 30 years now? For the better part of 30 years, I've been developing techniques and learning systems and learning ways of thought and learning analytical approaches and all these things. So, like, whenever I do all the things I'm about to describe to you, none of it's like intentional. I don't actually go step one, step two, step three. But what I'm trying to do is, if you do not have the benefit of 30 years of this kind of training, this is sort of me reverse engineering and breaking it down to sort of understand, oh, wait, these are the things that I do. I don't notice that I do them, but I do them. The same way, if you have like a great baseball pitcher, they just throw the ball really well. Of course, there's 1,000 things they do, and they could take 3 hours explaining to you the arm angle and how they hold the ball and where the seams are. But fundamentally, the main thing they do is throw the ball well. So let me explain to you how I throw the ball. Now, this image is not good enough for the internet. I thought about it and I said, no, 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 I can't do this. This is good enough for a college class. I need something more internet friendly. Ladies and gentlemen, I did an iceberg because what I realized was there was a hierarchy to these 6 things that I'm putting forth to you. The very top is the text, right there, just the words, the lyrics. Then the context, the social, political, personal elements around the text. And then underwater, we get the paratext, we get the intertext, we get the metatext, and then we get a revisit to the text with all the information that we have already studied and thought about. And what I came to realize, what I think is most important for you to understand about this textberg is it is descending levels of importance. So the most important stuff is text and context. The easiest things, descending levels of importance and rising levels of difficulty. Okay? So metatext is the least important and the most difficult. The text is the easiest and the most important. So in that way, it's kind of nice. That's why I think that any kind of analysis, if I can be Chef Cousteau, analysis is for everybody because really all you have to do. Okay, one second here. If I'm going to be describing my method, I will describe the primary method I teach to my students all the time. If a human being makes something, everything that something is the result of a human choice. That's it. So if it's a car, if it's a painting, if it's a song, if it's a building, every single thing a human being does is a result of a human choice. Every single part of that thing is a result of a human choice. Sky, what if it's random? That was a choice for it to be random. Okay. And what if it's abstract expressionism? That was a choice. There's a million ways to be abstract and careless. So if an artist chooses one of those, that's on purpose. So the number one thing is just why. And there's no one answer, but you just say why. Why did they put that there? That's why you can take any book, any painting, anything made by a human being and make a 5 hour video about it because you can go down to each decision and really break it down as well as you possibly can. Which is why the most important part is simply the text, is simply the thing itself. I hope this isn't too evident. I hope this is useful to you. So the text, the most important part. This video is only about how I analyze lyrics, but also this is how I analyze music. As a reminder, the term text, when used in fancy schmancy academic way, just means the thing that you're studying. So if you're talking about a movie, the movie is the text. Okay, if you're talking about a book, the book is the text, but like the text is the object of study, the actual thing. So I'm going to be talking to you only about lyrics in this video, but in reality, also talking about I'm also talking about music. I'm also talking about how to analyze anything. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to vulgarize some things that I learned in grad school. Vulgarize is not, in its original sense, the act or process of making something vulgar, inappropriate. The original meaning of vulgarization is the act or process of making something better understood by ordinary people. What does it mean that we use the word vulgar as an insult now? Maybe it's because so much of our language is classist. Ladies and gentlemen, which is a classist term. Gentleman is gentle, is a classist. Is classist and also eugenicist. Okay, vulgus, common people. So I am trying to take a lot of terms and make them for common people. So the text, the words, it's all you need. It's all you need. That's it. You're done. Congratulations. You've done the most important part. If you can actually take lyrics seriously, study them, think about them, look at them, roll them around in your mind, then you will have everything you need. You really can't stop here. If you do well, you don't need more. Context, the second most, I would say, important part, the second least difficult, the social, personal, and political background. Okay, so this is just everything around where the text was made. Does that make sense? Let me give you kind of a funny example. Okay. Um, yeah, it's the ability to see the larger picture around. Let me give you a funny example. I took some students a long time ago, whenever it was that the movie Get Out by Jordan Peele came out. We went and saw Get Out, and I watched it with some students. I took them on a trip to Montreal. We went to the movies and we saw it, and it was great. And I got out, and I don't remember their names. They weren't my students. They were someone else's students, but they were on the trip. I was like, this is really great, huh? This is amazing social commentary. And they said, what do you mean? I was like, well, it's about like, race in America and the way black masculinity is seen and the way like, black culture is appropriated by, white power structures. And they were like, I didn't pick up any of that. It's just a cool, scary movie. So like, that's an example of somebody who appreciated the text but did not go into the context at all, who did not see the larger picture. Now, that's a totally valid reading of that movie, by the way. You can read that movie in that way, but the more you get to the larger picture, the more you get out of it. Think of it like this landscape. Okay. This is a painting of a farmer and some cows, but really, right, they're very small compared to the context of the trees, right? If we look at this image and we say it's a painting of trees, that also makes sense. Like the everything that surrounds the subject of the painting, the subject of the text. And then we get to paratext. There's Gerard Jeanette. He's going to be all over the place. He is one of the people I'm vulgarizing. I'm going to, 1 second. I'm going to keep it a buck with you all. Literary analysis can be very tricky, especially when you're reading in a second language. So I've never really, really like loved reading Georges Jeanette. I really appreciate what he does. But a lot of the time when I was in grad school, I was like, what the hell is this guy saying? So I'm going to be vulgarizing the hell out of this in both senses of the word vulgar. If you are a snooty dooty smart pants person who's watching this to catch me in a mistake, feel free to tell me in the comments. Actually the hell out of this video, okay? And if you're watching this, look in the comments. Look at some people who are going to actually me, okay? Because I want to raise the level of discourse. All right? Can we do that? So paratext is anything around the text, the title, the introduction, the liner notes, the preface. Okay? These things are super, super important. This might be the picture on the cover of a book. You can't judge a book by its cover, but the cover of the book is what you judge when you first look at it. Okay, we're talking preface. These are things that you have to observe and connect. And that's obviously multiple different kinds, right? Because Descartes had nothing to do with the making of this book, right? He had nothing to do with it. This was made in 2005. But whoever it was that decided to do this image decided to choose an image which really does set your expectations of the book in a different way. It's not a picture of a great dead man. It's a picture of a path, because that's actually one of the parts of the book. It's talking about like how to make your way through life. A lot of this book is about feeling lost and what to do when you're lost, and how to make the best possible decisions. So like this person who made this decided to use this font and this image and all of that. And this has tainted and colored the way that I perceive of the work of Descartes, because this was the first time I ever read Descartes, was this right here. This paratext, this image is what I think of when I think of I think, therefore I am. Right here, not some old guy. So, obviously, because we're talking about new music, the paratext is controlled by the artists themselves. So this can be useful. This can even be a music video. Actually, one second, let me take a second here. Let me go back to myself. So, like the most recent Taylor Swift album at the time of recording is called Life of a Showgirl. The failure of Life of a Showgirl, and I thought it was a fine album, but the failure was a failure of paratext because the album cover and the title and the publicity photos were all like, here we go. She's going to talk about being a showgirl. It's going to be about the way that, I don't know, women are used and abused in society, but then also empowering them with their job and this wonderful kind of mixture of like class and gender. It's going to be this great thing. Just when you hear the title Life of a Showgirl, you know there's going to be something special. And then the entire album happens and it's not about that at all until the final song. And you're like, I guess this is Life of a Showgirl. It doesn't really work. The paratext was working against the text. The album should have been called uh, I Want to Get Married, which truly would have been a good title. That would have been a good title. That would have got us ready to have the kind of conversations we were going to have around that album. Anyways, you see, I'm getting views. I just mentioned Taylor Swift 11 minutes into a video. Okay, let's go back to my talk here. So that's paratext. Then we get to intertext, coined by Bulgarian and French thinker Julia Kristeva. Man, what an outfit, right? How the text makes references to other texts. So this is my bread and butter. This is in my opinion, the thing that I do particularly well, because this is the thing is where education and knowledge counts. This is where you hear, I don't know, like you hear a rapper and they quote a line from a song from the 80s, and if you know that song, then you go, oh, he's making reference to a Slick Rick song, and then you go back to Slick Rick, and then you think about what Slick Rick means, and then you compare that to the artist who's making the music now, and you're able to create some kind of interest. Okay, this intertext is a fascinating thing to be able to use because it is everywhere. Intertextuality is everywhere in our postmodern era. It is absolutely everywhere. As I told the students when I was growing up, this is true. When the movie Clerks came out in 1995, it was the first time I'd ever seen any movie, any TV show make reference to Star Wars. It was that rare. It was that rare to make references to other pieces of art in popular culture. That Clerks happened, and then Scream happened, and we had our whole meta modern moment, and it was all this wonderful stuff, right? So, like, we are living in a hyper intertextual moment. And this is a super useful thing to do because, as we will see with the examples I'm going to study, intertext is crucial. When an artist writes something, if they're thinking about something else, if you want to find an angle, you're done. Like, if you want to find an angle, a way to say something interesting, you are done. You know? Like, because all you have to do is talk about one thing and then talk about the other thing and then compare them. And that's interesting. And most people listening, they might not have made that connection. So that's like the main thing that I use. I use intertext, and it's super useful for me because I've got 30 years of listening. I will also add, if you allow me to be preachy, This is where brain health helps. I don't drink. I don't do drugs. I don't do sports that give me concussions. I take care of my brain. It seems like I'm joking, but I'm not. Man, you keep drinking, you keep doing drugs, man, you're gonna fuzz out. You're gonna fuzz out the parts of your brains that need to be sharp for this kind of analysis. So just saying, hey, maybe you don't care. That's fine. But this is how you stay sharp, because this kind of stuff requires sharpness. It requires building on knowledge that you have. So this is, I say education and knowledge. I would say in my case, it's mostly knowledge. It's mostly things that I've accrued from a lifetime of studying culture very carefully and really caring about it and really thinking about it and really allowing it to seep into the fabric of my canvas. The education helps with things like this because I never heard the term intertext until whatever, I was in grad school. So that's the next level. But again, if you don't pick up on it, it's not always necessary, as I will show. Metatext, we're back with Georges Jeanette here. Sorry for the red slide, it's kind of unpleasant. This is the hardest to describe, commentary on the artist or the text itself. Jeanette used the term transtextuality, based. He used the term transtextuality to refer to like anything that transcends the text itself. That was his view of it all. I really suggest you look into Georges Jeanette. He's easier now that I am not getting graded on him. And it's usually the hardest to define. And then the text itself. Don't lose sight. Go back. Never lose sight of the text. That's the main thing that like aspiring intellectuals will do. They'll go flying off into space. Okay. They'll just go wee way off into intertextuality, metatextuality, and even deeper stuff that I'm talking about here. As far as grad school goes, this is like fairly basic stuff. Like I once I did I went to a grad school conference at the University of California, Irvine, where a guy named Jacques Derrida was a professor. So he was like the head of everything. Everyone was just trying to be like him. And all of the presentations that were given there were completely incomprehensible to me because he is one of the furthest out there. He's fascinating, but furthest out there intellectuals in the history of 20th century thinking. And so they were all basing everything on him. And just like they would just start talking and just be just completely lost. And the image that I have is of an astronaut who cuts the line while on a spacewalk, and they're just flying off. Simulacrum. It's flying off through space. You got to keep that. You got to keep that rope attached to that ship. You can go far out there, but then you got to come back and say, what are the actual words? So the words are the heart of the text. Sky, lamest sentence you've ever said. So that is a brief explanation of my method. I am now going to, because you can tell the video goes much longer than this, going to break down the works that we did in class. So we're talking a poem by John Ashbery. We're talking a song by Radiohead, Exit Music for a Film. And we are talking a song from Geese, Long Island City, Here I Come. So these are the songs and the poem we decided to study, and this is how I showed them how I applied my method. So if you want to click off now, you go right ahead. This is the basic idea, right? But if you want to go further, if you want to see more how this works, then continue along with me as I break down a poem. Where is my stuff? Okay. All right. Make sure I'm sharing this. Oh no. Okay. All right. 1 second. Okay, sometimes this happens. Okay, sometimes this happens. Okay, I think I need to pause the recording because sometimes Zoom gets really fancy with me. 1 second. Okay, good. I fixed it. I don't know. Sometimes they don't allow me to show the whole thing. So this is the poem, and I suggest you pause it and read it. I'm going to read it out to you, but I suggest you pause it and read it. The first time I'd ever read this poem was a week ago when I was getting ready to teach this class. Okay, so this is a very good example of the kind of methodology that I'm talking about, because this is not a poem I knew. This is not a poet that I knew. I do like poetry, but I have this weird history. Anyways, we'll not talk about my weird history. So now that you've paused it and read it, let's move on with it. Okay, these are the questions. What's going on? Who is this? Who are these people? Who is he? Who is this person who's going to find you, and what is the gift that they have for you? These are the questions. So let's go through all these items. There's John Ashbery over there on the side. At North Farm by John Ashbery. Somewhere, someone is traveling furiously toward you at incredible speed, traveling day and night through blizzards and desert heat, across torrents, through narrow passages, but he will know where to find you, recognize you when he sees you, give you the thing he has for you? Hardly anything grows here. Yet the granaries are bursting with meal, the sacks of meal piled to the rafters. The streams run with sweetness, fattening fish. Birds darken the sky. Is it enough that the dish of milk set out at night, that we think of him sometimes, and always with mixed feelings? So the text, that's what we got here. A mess. It is a mess. There's two stanzas, and they don't appear to have much to do with each other except at the very end. There's this contradiction of blizzards and desert heat, and sometimes and always, which are actually opposite words. Even more than never and always is sometimes and always. We have this repetition of someone somewhere, and then it's paid off with sometimes down at the end. There's confusing stuff with like sweet streams and like food and a lack of food and like what is this thing. There's all these things going on, and so we're feeling kind of lost. Okay, right now, the first time I read this poem, I read it, and I just saw it immediately as a metaphor for death, because that's kind of how we perceive of death, as just moving towards you. I was thinking intertextually in ways that were impossible. I was thinking of the great episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, where a character is coming back from the dead and is like constantly walking towards Buffy. I'm not going to tell you which character, and it's just like very like the relentless march of death, the kind of sense that you have, the speed there, but then at the same time, I don't know. I got all confused. I got all confused because the second stanza doesn't seem to have much to do with the first one, which is what makes it such a fascinating poem. So that's where you might want to go to context. This is where you might want to go to context. Someone wrote, Matt mentioned the name, but I forget. I apologize. That it's very clearly about death, because John Ashbery had a health scare right before writing this. He almost died before writing this back in 1984. So you go, okay, that makes sense. Except John Ashbery himself said, no, 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 I wrote this before that. I've always thought of this as a love poem. And then he goes on to say something along the lines of, but that's okay because love and death are always the same, which is like, it's pretty true. And this is where I started thinking a different intertextual thing. I started thinking about The Day Before You Came, the ABBA song that I did a whole video on, where it's about the day before a lover comes, but you can also see it as the day before death comes. In that case, the death and the lover are the same. So this person who's coming towards him, is this his lover? Is this man going to be his lover who's coming to get him? Is that what he has for him? Are those the mixed feelings of finding love? I don't know. This is the great complexity. This is the context. Wait, did I? Or, also just because I live outside of Rochester, New York. Hey, there is an Ashbery farm. Is that the North Farm that he's talking about? It's in Sodus. Beautiful town. Had some flooding a couple years ago. All right. Is that it? Is it all about Reagan? Because it came out in 1984. So I don't know. That was another reading I had, because that was the time of growing wealth inequality. And so the granaries are bursting with meal, but hardly anything grows. Like the people who need the food don't have it, but the people who store the food do. Is that a big metaphor? Is Reagan the person who we sometimes and always have mixed feelings about? Is the invisible hand of free market capitalism blazing towards us? These are all readings which are possible through context. None of them are valid, none of them are invalid. That's just the whole point. You could just create the reading that you want to create based on the text. The paratext. So where did this first appear? It first appeared in the New Yorker. The New Yorker, the symbol of urbane elitism. A great magazine. A friend of mine, I believe, still works there. I visited the offices once. It was very cool. In One World Trade Center. Very nice building. So that already the paratext there implies a certain amount of snobbery, a certain amount of elitism, a certain amount of sophistication. That's very different than if it was, I don't know, published in a zine. It was also contained in a book called A Wave. When you know that the title of the collection of poems is called A Wave, you think differently. You think it's about, well, what is a wave if not a part of an ocean, something that you cannot avoid, an unstoppable force of nature, a beautiful sign of nature, a complex word that's also a homonym with like wave, hello, but also you see there's actual a wave underneath. You see the ocean image underneath. So then we're now kind of tying into more images of nature. All right. All of these things. And then the main piece of paratext is what I provided you. Look at this handsome son of a bitch over there. Look at him. Huh? Rocking those director pants, right? That's not what poets look like. So I gave you that image specifically so that you would have an image of a young, sensitive, sweet poet. But you want to see another image of John Ashbery? That's also John Ashbery from the movie in 2015. Okay? What if I gave you that image? Does that look like the person who wrote this poem? These are all things that go around the text that are not the text that we study. What if I showed you this image of John Ashbery? Okay? This is also John Ashbery. That room looks nice. It just needs a little more gold. Intertext. According to Wikipedia, the poem is in part a reference to the epic poem Kalevala, which he revisited. I don't know what this means at all. I don't know Finnish folk poetry. So this is a good example. Sometimes it's not your thing. This poem is not my thing. I'm not doing this for a review. I'm just doing this for now. If this were a review, what would I have to do? I'd have to find the Kalevala. I would have to read the entire Kalevala. I would have to read at least one or two articles about the Kalevala to tie it in. That's the sort of academic way. Like you find little rabbit holes and you go down them and you explore them. So if Kendrick released an album and he made reference to the Kalevala, I would have to read the Kalevala and then figure out why it's connected. That's intertext at its sort of simplest. But beyond that, I'm not familiar with the intertext of this poem at all. Because again, I'm not really a poetry guy. The metatext, I don't know. This is where that my ignorance is really showing. This is the most difficult. I mean, I do think there is something in which the fact that the second stanza is so aggressively ignoring the energy and the panic of the first stanza that it is commenting on the poetic form itself. It is playing with our expectations. But that's, when you get to the metatext area, sometimes you end up just kind of doing jazz. Like you end up having to be more creative than analytical, which is a huge part of what I do and what most good academics do. And then you have to revisit the text, You talk about the opposites, you talk about the extremes, you talk about death and love. There's no rhymes. It's a poem and there's no rhymes. Someone somewhere is traveling towards you at incredible speed, traveling day and night. What a thing to do! Through blizzards and desert heat, across torrents, through narrow passes that are neat. I don't know. No, it's not rhyming. Okay. There's a whole theme of animals in here. One of the students said this whole thing could be about a cat, which I thought was a very good reading. You could read this whole play as a cat, like bringing back something that it killed to you, and like the food and everything, and like setting out the milk. That's a fascinating idea, right? And could it be political? Could this all be about Reagan? All right, so let's get to a song. Exit music for a film by Radiohead. Again, if you don't know the lyrics, I suggest you pause this and you read these lyrics. So let's go back to my method. Okay, text, context, paratext, intertext, metatext, text. Wake from your sleep, the drying of your tears. Today we escape, we escape. Pack and get dressed before your father hears us, before all hell breaks loose. Breathe, keep breathing, don't lose your nerve. Breathe, keep breathing, I can't do this alone. Sing us a song to keep us warm. There's such a chill, there's such a chill. And you can laugh, a spineless laugh. We hope your rules and wisdom choke you. And now we are one in everlasting peace. We hope that you choke, that you choke. We hope that you choke, that you choke. We hope that you choke, that you choke. So just looking at the text, just right off the bat with the text, it's this, it's what I love about, and all I loved about the song is how much that line about before your father hears us. On some level, it feels like a great cosmic escape, but then it's also a real escape. So the way he's playing around with this idea of like this escape from this father figure and the way things move and the level of repetition and you say what's going on, who is you, and who are we? right? That's the big question. Like, who is the you that he's waking up, and then who is the we, and then who is the you at the end of the song? Because he actually doesn't refer to the person who he's waking up as you. He just says wake from your sleep. But then you can laugh a spineless laugh. So who are these people? What are all these things? Like what is actually going on in this song? My whole life, I have never particularly known what the song. I bought OK Computer on the Tuesday that it was released in 1997. I remember listening to it in my friend Ben's Toyota Corolla, driving down Newbury Street in Boston after buying it at Tower Records at midnight. Okay, I remember. I remember hearing Airbag for the first time and the entire car losing its mind, going, "What is the bass doing?" Okay, so that's how long I've been listening to the song Exit Music for a Film. That's how long I've been listening to this song. I've never studied it like this. I've just listened and been like, oh, cool. Oh, nice. I've had no idea. I've just heard it and I see it as part of the larger context of Tom York's uncomfortableness with existence, his struggles with depression, and his struggles with feeling like many people of our generation lost in a larger system that is uncaring. So that's the text. The context, well, this is why it's important to me because I was around for the context. I remember what the late 1990s were like. I remember what it was like being a Generation Xer. I remember the ridiculousness of our concerns and the validity of our concerns. Being around at this time, if you take the movies like Fight Club and you take movies like The Matrix and and you take just so much of what we were doing back then was complaining about frankly a life that most young people would like to have now, the life of working for a company, working in an office, just being a part of some uncaring system and just kind of being part of it. But like that kind of spiritual emptiness was the thing that we were struggling with as Xers. So I've read this song, Though We Hope You Choke, as always being you, being the man, being Coca-Cola, being Pepsi, being UMG, whatever, right? Like that's how I've always read it. That was the context to me. That was the context of the artist. That was the context of the time. This late millennial malaise. To me, that's the context and how I've always read it. The paratext feeds into that context with the amazing image on the cover, which gives that sense of ghostliness, a lack of tangibility. The way the song feels is the way this image by Stanley Donwood and Tom York looks. This is how it looks, a mixture of corporate signage and ghostly images and highways and impersonal stuff. And when you open it up and they have these little images on the inside, a job that kills you, you look so tired, so unhappy, all these things feed into it. It all creates that, it reinforces it. And then we get to the intertext. I have listened to this song several times a year since 1997, and I had no idea of the thing I'm about to tell you. Okay? This was news to me when I was preparing this class. This song was originally written for Romeo and Juliet by Baz Luhrmann, starring Claire Danes and some other guy, Leonardo DiCaprio. I had no idea. No idea. I've seen Romeo and Juliet. I remember that the song was used at the end, but I thought it was cheesy, like, oh, exit music for a film. Now that we know that the song was written about Romeo and Juliet, it completely changes the nature of the song. For the first time, after listening to it literally hundreds of times, I now understand it as being sung from the point of Romeo and Juliet escaping, because their parents are parts of different families who are trying to kill each other, their love is forbidden, and they end up ending their own lives by drinking poison, and I think one of them stabs himself. It's been a while since I've read it, right? But the point is mutual self annihilation to escape, and so that they could be together. And so all of a sudden now we have an escape that is a physical escape. We have an escape that is an escape of life. We had this sense of everlasting peace, the everlasting peace that comes from death. That's what they're talking about, love and death. These things pair really well together with John Ashbery's poem. Good job, Matt. Awesome pairing these things together. This is why you get good professors, because they can give you these things that seem like they're not connected at all, but are totally connected here. Where you have someone where death is trying to find them, and then another song where they are trying to find something in death. Breathe, keep breathing, don't lose your nerve, and then we hope that you choke. We then all of a sudden the you is the Capulets and the Montagues. Now here's the thing: this is not an opposite reading. My Generation X reading of this being like a general, like, down with the man, they suck, I don't want to buy Pepsi, all that stuff. I know it sounds silly, but like, the you is kind of the same. Like the Montagues and Capulets represent society, represent a rigid, hierarchical, divisive, warlike, tribalistic culture, which is the one that we live in. So even though I didn't know what the song was about, even though it's pretty damn clear once I hear it, my reading was still valid. It was just missing the intertext. That's it. I was just missing it. But I still totally understood the song. That's why all this stuff is important and also completely useless. The metatext, I think it is fair to say that this was entering the period where Radiohead started to write a lot of songs about being in Radiohead. I don't think that's necessarily in this song too much. Oh, I did want to play with you with Paratext because we often see Tom York as an image. I saw this image of I remember seeing this. I think it was might have been Spin magazine. But anyways, I remember this image of Tom York from back in the day. That's also Tom York. What if that was the album cover of this song? It wouldn't work. So, we get all these things all together until you revisit the text. You go back to the level of repetition. You go back to the story of Romeo and Juliet. How does it fit together? If you don't read it as Romeo and Juliet, how does it all fit together? What is a spineless laugh? I had all the students try and do a spineless laugh together. They couldn't really do it because how do you do a spineless laugh? What does that mean? Does that just mean cowardly? Like a cowardly laugh? Like, is that what they're talking about? Who is choking? I think you could read it that Romeo and Juliet are choking as well. You could imagine them flipping the story and have it be the parents saying, I hope you choke because you tried to rebel against our authority and against our ridiculous feud, right? You could say that as well. And it's another damn poem where it doesn't rhyme. It just doesn't rhyme. Wake from your sleep, the drying of your tears, my sweet. Pack and get dressed before your father hears us, and I'm getting stressed. He could have rhymed it all. The final song that we studied was Long Island City, Here We Come by Geese. Again, pause the text if you've never read it. I'm going to go through this one a little bit quicker because I believe a stove repairman just came and I need to help out. What's going on here? What is Long Island City? These are the questions. How do we go through all these things? Nobody knows where they're going. Nobody knows but me. I've told poor Joan, you've been talking. I'm going to go through all these lyrics soon here. So you should really read these. I just reviewed this album like last month, right? Probably the best album of the year. Okay. So with this song, you have the text, so many things to study. You have the context. Hey, what is the context of 2025? You have it, buddy. You got it. You got the context. Whatever you want to say about what's been happening in the last year, that's when Cameron Winter wrote these words. Whatever's been happening. Is this song all about Trump? I don't know. I don't think so, but you can make the argument. Is this song all about the war in Gaza? I don't know. The genocide in Gaza? I don't know. But you could say it is, but I don't know. Is this song about Ukraine? I don't know. I don't think it is. Is this song about smartphones? I don't know, but it is. You actually understand all the context. You understand the context. Okay, if you don't live in America, you might not understand it. If you're not young, you might not understand it completely, but like you have great access to the greater context around this music, around this time. The paratext, we have the image of the cover, which is someone holding a gun and playing music. This is very much in tune with the text itself. This kind of combination of ethereal beauty and violence is crucial to the feel of the album. That complexity, that imagery on the inside of the liner notes that you see is a very similar thing. This sort of like the combination of violence and beauty. The album title is called Getting Killed. So all these things all feeds into it. There's a bomb in my car is what it says on the liner notes as well in big words, which is from a different song. So like there is a fair amount of anger. There's a fair amount of violence in the paratext. That I think is at odds with a lot of the beauty of the music. Beauty and violence. I would say that's what this is. You want to go back to context. Is this just a general song? Is this the general thing about America? Like, is that not an image of America? Like a beautiful person playing a trumpet while pulling a gun on you. So there's some paratext. But it's the intertext where this song just takes off. This is where you just get lost. So, I told poor Joan, we've been talking. And so it's Joan of Arc because he says it in the next song, and you can talk to him and you can talk to me. So, like, it's about talking to Joan of Arc. So, Joan of Arc was famous for talking to Jesus. And so he's trying to communicate with Joan of Arc. So, he's trying to talk to somebody with vision and he's trying to get her to talk to him. It's this weird, fascinating play where it's like, if you could talk to Jesus, you could talk to me. But, like, though, it doesn't even really matter. Like, he's desperately trying to find some place place for his artistic vision, I think, to go. I think that's what this intertext is. I also think that he's referring to this particular painting that is in the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City. I believe that's what this is, but I don't know. So, like that's intertext. You have to know the story of Joan of Arc or look up the story of Joan of Arc. Then talks about Joshua kicked the king out of Jericho, about to kick your ass up and down the streets. So, they're trying to get back to the promised land. So they have to free Jericho and they free it with trumpets. But then, there's also kind of militaristic items. So then that goes back to the paratext. Is that what the album cover is? Because they free Jericho by playing trumpets. So she's playing trumpets, but then has a gun. So is that what this is? Is that like what America is? Is this a comment on American imperialism where we use our amazing culture to get ourselves into the door and everyone says, wow, this is amazing. I love rock and roll and Coca-Cola. And then we say, that's great. You love rock and roll and Coca-Cola. And if you don't, we're going to shoot you in the head and we're going to occupy you, right? Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. Is this an argument? Potentially, this is a song about the genocide in Gaza? I don't think so, but it's possible. It is a possible reading that comes from the text. I don't think you're too far out there. I think you're still holding on to the cord if you want to make that reference, because here we got Joshua and Jericho. All right, about to kick your ass up and down the street. That's a fascinating change in tone and register. The term is register. When you write in a poetic register, you're writing in a very fancy way. When you're saying I'm going to kick your ass, you're writing in a very low way. He's constantly, much like Ashbery, constantly going between kind of different sort of levels of register here while he's talking. Intertext, I knew a man, he sat behind his desk that was 1,000,000 feet wide. Is this a reference to Franz Kafka? I think so. I think so. I think this is Kafka-esque because he often wrote about people who felt alienated and alone in the world. He laid down his hammer and he died. So here's a reference to John Henry. John Henry, when he was a baby, okay, famous John Henry, the story of a steel driving man who fought a battle against a machine. The context is crucial here because he's talking in a way like in a 90s way. The Kafka image is very kind of a 90s thing, like, I don't want to be in an office. This desk is 1,000,000 miles wide. But then it's also about hustle culture. It's also about the obsession with work. So it's also about John Henry laying down his hammer and died because John Henry, when he was competing against a machine that was laying down railroad spikes, he beat the machine, but then he died. So is this like a general commentary? We have to go back to context. This is a general commentary on the nature of work culture and the way that we think about work. And how does this tie into Joan of Arc? Oh my God, there's so many things going on here. And we're still not done with intertext. This is why I'm telling you, this is the part where knowledge and education help, right? Because then we get to Charlemagne in Vietnam. Charlemagne was one of the great leaders of the Dark Ages who conquered all over the place and is the reason that we call France France. Like Charlemagne in Vietnam, until I come home, I am not. Until I come home, I'm not anyone. Long Island City, here I come. Like Charlemagne on the midnight bus. I have no idea where I'm going. Here I come, here I come, here I come. So Charlemagne was this medieval emperor who conquered many places in Europe, and Vietnam is a place where America lost a war trying to fight back communism. So it's about like empire and domination. Now all of a sudden, we have like the Jericho thing in here and we have Charlemagne, and we have Vietnam, and we all of a sudden have a very post-colonial, decolonial, anti-imperialist message that you can read into the song. Because Charlemagne, would he have won in Vietnam? Would he have won in Vietnam? Or was America like Charlemagne in Vietnam? Now he says he feels like Charlemagne in Vietnam, but is he America? These are all the kinds of questions that you can just get to just from the text and from this intertext. And not to mention, the Vietnam War happened because France lost control of what it called Indochine. Okay, Indochine freed itself from France and then became Vietnam, and then half of it became communist, and the other half wasn't. I mean, that's like literally how the Vietnam War started. Was after France, the Empire of France, that is not a continuous empire, but still we can see it going back to Charlemagne, failed. That's okay. So all these things are all mixed in together. These are all intertextual moments that we can have with this song that's like 3 months old. And this is where I think it's fun. There's a term in French called tiré par les cheveux, which means pulled from the hair. Something not probable, something illogical, something difficult to believe. Okay? So that's why I'm saying, is this song a song about French and by extension, American Western imperialism? Because Joan of Arc has been captured by conservative forces in France to represent anti-immigrant beliefs. Okay, that's how she's been used. Unfortunately, the fascists have taken Joan of Arc. If you love Joan of Arc and you tell the French, "I love Joan of Arc," they'll look at you with like, that'd be like saying, "I love the Constitution," right? It's sad, but it's true. It's been co-opted. And then you tie that into images of Charlemagne and Vietnam. We have a whole French reading of this thing, of this story that has to do with the pains of losing empire and the threats to empire and the ways that threats are pushed back. So like that is tiré par les cheveux. This is probably all entirely invented by me because I'm a French professor and I did have a nice conversation with Cameron Winter. I didn't ask him all these questions, but you know I don't think he has a doctorate in French history, literature, and sociology, right? So I don't think he does. So I think this is tiré par les cheveux, but it's okay as long as you bring it back to the text, you are not in space. You can always pull back. You're at the end of the rope, but you can always pull back. Now, in this intertext, I also, in my video, talked about how this was similar to a song called Screenwriter Blues by Soul Coughing. And this was one of my favorite moments in talking to Cameron Winter was he said that he liked this parallel that I drew. And it wasn't intentional. He didn't know this song or he wasn't trying to reference this song, but he's making a song in which Long Island City represents a kind of mythical afterlife. And Soul Coughing had a song in which the city of Reseda in Los Angeles represented a kind of mythical afterlife. Both of them are cities or towns near a larger metropole, near Los Angeles or near New York City, that are seen as kind of a joke, kind of lacking culture, kind of lacking class. So, like, that was a good intertextual moment that I made that was totally not real, but still helped to inform the text and was part of my angles. There's this whole intertext about Buddy Holly and the day the music died and the song American Pie. And I made fun of the song for like 5 minutes because I hate the song American Pie. And then it turns out most of the students knew the song and liked it. So I looked like an asshole. It's always good. You make yourself look like an asshole. Um, it's not that hard for me. So like what I like about this is that this is intertext, but this is also, as far as I can tell, the best example of metatext because if you follow the art of Cameron Winter, he's obsessed by the idea of a masterpiece. So that makes it clear that this whole song, my whole imperialistic reading, might be different. It might actually be a song about the nature of trying to find masterpiece, trying to find meaning, and then it belongs to the dead. Like he's trying to chase something that can't be there. He's trying to transcend life through brilliance and artistic creation, but he cannot beat death. He is always going to end up in the symbolic place of death, which is Long Island City. He's always going to end up there no matter how brilliant he is. He might end up just being Charlemagne on a midnight bus. And if you've ever been on a midnight bus, it's a lonely place to be. It's a lonely, scary, dark place to be. So the text starts and finishes in opposite ways. Nobody knows where they're going except for me. I don't know where I'm going. This ties in with the opposites of the Ashbery poem, with the opposites of the Tom York poem. Like all these things all tie in together as like ways of writing and ways of thinking. The repetition again. Huge amount of repetition in here. Here I come, here I come, here I come. No rhymes again. I told poor Joan, I know who you've been talking. No, I told poor Joan, I know you've been talking. You've been talking to you know who, and it's not Christopher Walken, right? Why didn't he sing that? Okay, because there's no rhymes. Even though we're talking about poetry, you have to go beyond rhymes. Is it about death? The John Ashbery poem was about death inexorably coming for you. This song is about you going inexorably towards death. If Long Island City represents death, which I think is the clearest reading, then is that not a fun thing that's happened here, where we end up having three poems that should not be connected in any way and aren't really connected in any way, but they all have different relationships towards movements towards and the movement of death and youth? Is this a lot about being young and lost? Is it about being young and lost and trying to figure out where you are and how you don't know where you're going? When you're young, you don't know where you're going, but you also think you know where you're going. That's what it is when you're in your 20s. You're positive you know what you're doing and you have no goddamn idea what you're doing all at the same time. So with all these techniques, I hopefully have arrived at a framing device or an angle, either through intertext, through metatext, through paratext, through context. Context is the easiest, like, oh, this is about the political situation. Oh, this is about economic inequality. Oh, this is about the city where it's from. Paratext then kind of makes it easy. Oh, this is the way they present themselves. Then intertext, oh, this is a reference to that. Oh, but when all else fails, get creative. So that's what I do. When all else fails, I just get creative and personal and I try to tie it in to myself. I try to just rely on the fact that if you're watching me this far, then you have some interest in what I'm saying or doing. When all else fails, if none of those things work, then you could just tie it in with your life and try to help connect to the person who's watching or who's listening or who's reading in a way that is like engaging in some way that just goes beyond just the simple text. So I hope this was interesting. I don't know. I told my wife this would be a short video. I don't think it is, but I hope it was interesting. Please tell me if you think this is worth doing. I could do more like this. I could do more like how I listen. Kind of more specifics there. But hopefully, you like this little exploration into how to break down texts. Hopefully, I have vulgarized it well enough. All right. Till next time. There's the camera.